Hello again, and welcome to Hot Takes! Thanks as always to my wonderful patrons for making these episodes possible, links below. Now, before we begin, I need my DC followers to trust me on this. I am merely using the crossover as a jumping off point for a wider topic. Now then, I already low-key addressed this in the original trailer breakdown, but lots of people from the ne'er-do-well crowd are in a bit of tizzy, specifically about the Justice League calling in Team Ruby to assist when Grimm and a villain from their universe are causing trouble in the Justice League's neighborhood. This on its face is just silly. After all, when Rita Repulsa shows up, you call the Power Rangers. If Shredder is in town, the TMNT won't be far behind. Calling in consultants is just good practice and also the basis for how crossovers work. But if we strip away those deliberate misunderstandings about how crossovers and basic storytelling works, there is an underlying trend along the lines of the Justice League has dealt with so many invasions and so many villains, this should be easy for them. But that begs the question why they think that. Sure, this Justice League clearly has some experience given they reference Vandal Savage and Time, but how does that translate to interdimensional murder monsters? Well, so the logic goes, the Justice League as a concept have been around for so many decades and dealt with so many threats that the end of the world should just be old hat to them at this point. But that isn't every version of the Justice League. In fact, not any one version of the Justice League ever. To scale this back to something easy to understand, modern Batman has certainly seen his fair share of shit. He has not, however, dealt with Alfred dying and coming back as the outsider to get revenge on him and Robin. Why? Because that storyline is no longer canon to his timeline thanks to Insert Crisis here. Stuff gets erased, rewritten, split off into different universes. Thus, even the closest thing to the true Batman or the true Justice League have still only ever dealt with so many battles, stories, and foes within their universe's history. But some fans ignore that in favour of assuming it just collectively applies to all of them, and thus their age makes them superior to basically any issue they could ever encounter. It's sort of like how the Fate series makes it that the older your legend is, the stronger the heroic spirit is, which is why the world's angriest twink is the strongest heroic spirit, while poor Cyrus the Great doesn't even rate a character card. This is of course not a very good way of approaching interpreting characters, and even those fans will only do it selectively. I mean, I doubt any of those guys are going, Batman is the darkest, edgiest, hardest hard man, while considering Batman and Robin's adventures with Santa Claus as part of this collective canon. But while this is an annoying if ultimately meaningless way to handle characters and universes for fans, it's an incredibly vexing thing to see done by writers. I've touched on this before with stuff like Superman being treated as a universal symbol for peace and heroism and righteousness when frankly these aliens should have no idea who he is. Or how Batman can blatantly do impossible stuff and it's justified with, because I'm Batman, when no amount of Batmaning should let him just wander up to someone with super hearing. This is bad writing because it essentially relies on the audience doing the work of applying these characters' real-world meta as beloved symbols and then extrapolating it into their comic book counterparts. This is regardless of whether said comic has done the legwork to justify the character having such a reputation or capabilities. This is why you'll get live-action movies having characters acting like this isn't your grandma's superhero when someone kills, even though nothing tonally or within the movie's canon indicates that this is odd behaviour. It's responding to a default that does not inherently exist, one that will be different for every person based on their own experiences either with the medium or the specific story in question, rather than actually writing a story that stands up on its own. In essence, it's incredibly lazy writing. But never let it be said that I'm only negative. There are ways to do this well, two I can think of right now, one subtle and one very in your face. A subtle example would be how the late great Chadwick Boseman was portrayed in the movie Da 5 Bloods. Specifically, he's presented in a regal, king-like manner, essentially paying homage to his role as the King of Wakanda in the MCU. This works because while it's a nice bit of cultural meta-echoing, the movie doesn't rely on it, they sell us on the character alone. And you don't need to have seen anything to do with the MCU in order to get the sense of who this character is and what they represent. The more in-your-face and more lighthearted example would be Lego Batman. Alfred shows it best by flicking through various Lego incarnations of the Caped Crusader. This Batman having all the resources of every Batman and more hubris than God and a reputation to match makes sense. After all, he has actually done basically everything. Well, except all the Robin stuff, but given the tongue-in-cheek nature of the story, it can play fast and loose with the canon a bit to make the point. So yeah, it is possible, it's just sadly not done often, and regardless, it doesn't work well in versus debates. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to support my work or commission 3D art, please check out my Patreon and Ko-fi respectively.